Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly O'Horo, and this is Adaptable Behavior Explained. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in today to Adaptable Behavior Explained. I think you're going to love this episode because if you're someone who deals with contempt, either something that you have for others or something that you've experienced from others toward you, then this episode is for you. We are continuing this topic of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse in this episode. We're talking about contempt today, and this is all based on John Gottman's research. And contempt is one of those Four Horsemen. If you didn't see the episode on the overview of the Four Horsemen, that I dropped about 12 months ago. And so this is a breakdown and a continuation of those topics. So let's talk about what contempt is, because this is the most dangerous of the Four Horsemen. It sounds sharper, it feels colder, it cuts deeper than the other emotions. Where criticism attacks behavior or character, contempt attacks worth. It communicates superiority, disgust, and disrespect. And over time, it drastically erodes the foundation of a relationship. So today we're going to talk about what contempt is, according to Gottman, how often it shows up and why it's so damaging, and really how it impacts relationships and emotional safety. The attachment styles that are most often associated with contempt are pretty important to understand. If you haven't seen the episodes on attachment and attachment style, I highly recommend checking that out. We really should know our attachment styles in those of whom we love. So we also are going to talk about what early experiences wire someone toward contempt and how to tell the difference between frustration and contempt. How to repair and healing are possible even here with contempt. So let's start with what contempt actually looks like, because some people think they know what this one is and really they don't. So according to Gottman, the research on contempt is communicated through disrespect, mockery, sarcasm, name-calling, eye-rolling, sneering, or dismissive body language. It says, I'm better than you, I think I know more than you, and whatever you think and feel is not of interest to me. It often sounds like sarcasm, maybe a mocking tone, the passive-aggressive comments under your breath, belittling comments, name-calling, eye-rolling, scoffing. These are all things that say someone has contempt. Unlike criticism, which says you did something wrong, contempt says you're beneath me. It's shaming, and by nature, it says I don't appreciate who you are as a person. Let me give you some examples of what this might look like. And it can be pretty tough. Wow, you really are clueless. I can't believe I married someone like you. Eye rolling when a partner or a person in a relationship speaks. Dismissive laughter or sneers when they're talking. Contempt attacks dignity, not behavior, where criticism attacks behavior. And so it's really painful to experience contempt. It's really shame-producing if you're someone who's showing contempt and you realize that about yourself. It's very painful because you know the damage that it causes. The Gottmans are very clear about this. Contempt is the single greatest predictor of relationship breakdown. Full stop. While all couples and people in relationships will occasionally slip into the other horsemen, contempt is far less common in healthy relationships, and it's far more dangerous when it appears. The occasional irritation or frustration is normal. Face it, no matter who you are in relationship, there are times when you look over at the person and you think, I don't even know how we're in this situation because I don't even really enjoy this person. Frustration, irritation with some of their behaviors. Contempt is more deeply rooted. Contempt usually emerges after some long-standing unresolved conflict. So in relationships where people haven't circled back to repair, they haven't addressed the pain points and the issues, and it's accumulation of resentment, of dissatisfaction, of disappointment. Chronic criticism and defensiveness can erode into contempt. And repeated emotional injury after emotional injury without resolution, without accountability, without honest, authentic apology will then bring contempt. Once contempt becomes frequent or habitual, Gottman's research shows it predicts separation, divorce, and the unraveling of a relationship. So the other horsemen damage relationships, and contempt completely erodes relationships. So if this is something that you know you do or something that you have toward your partner or someone you're in close relationship with, You really need to address it if you want to save the relationship. Contempt destroys emotional safety. So for a partner on the receiving end, contempt often leads to excessive shame, humiliation, withdrawal, depression, loss of trust, feeling fundamentally and deeply unlovable. And for the partner that expresses contempt, it's often masking something much more vulnerable that is not been expressed or has been expressed without being received. This is chronic disappointment. This is emotional exhaustion. This is hopelessness. This is unprocessed grief or a sense of moral superiority as protection. Over time, contempt destroys goodwill. It makes repair feel unsafe. It shuts down vulnerability, which is really the only key to reconnection is vulnerability. We've got to be able to bring ourselves to a place where we're disarmed, where we put our protectors down to create repair. It creates emotional distance that can sometimes, if it goes on too long, can feel irreversible. Some examples of what this might look like is this is when a partner stops trying because nothing feels safe anymore. Nothing has been proactively addressed. Conversations become laced with sarcasm, dismissal, avoidance, and these emotional injuries are met with ridicule instead of care. Where contempt lives, vulnerability cannot survive. And vulnerability, like I mentioned, is the only way to repair and reconnection after ruptures. And so we must be able to drop in underneath those walls. So let's talk about the attachment styles that breed contempt, because contempt most often shows up in avoidant or dismissive attachment. But it can also appear in people who feel chronically disappointed or trapped. And so thinking about your story, if you're someone who has contempt or shows contempt, think about your attachment style. So from an attachment perspective, contempt can develop when needs have gone unmet for a long time and repair has repeatedly failed. This is where hope for change can sometimes erode, where emotional withdrawal feels safer than longing. And maybe someone has been in that longing space for so long and they can't get their needs met or be heard, or their person does not engage in the changes they had hoped for, and this is where contempt comes in. It creates distance by positioning the self above the partner or the person in relationship, and it's a way to avoid the pain of an unmet attachment need. Internally, contempt might sound like, I don't need you, I don't need anyone, they'll never change, why bother, why try? I'm done being disappointed, I'm over it. So contempt is often attachment grief, and it hardens into armor. So through that AIP EMDR lens, because you know that's how I'm going to look at it, this is all learned. Everything we ever do is from a learned adaptation. And so that AIP perspective brings up contempt that's often rooted in memory networks that involves chronic invalidation of an emotional experience. This is where a parent did nothing to validate an emotional experience. They didn't bother to make any changes. They never listened to you. And there was just chronic powerlessness in your environment. Being seen or unheard was the norm. Having needs was a burden or inconvenience. And long-term emotional neglect does this. It roots a person in, I can't count on anybody, so why bother? Experiences where vulnerability led to repeated injury. So over time, the nervous system learns things. It learns that softness isn't safe, it'll be judged, ridiculed, or criticized. That if I care, it just leads to pain. So distance is protection. It's how I keep myself from being hurt all the time. Contempt becomes a way to avoid feeling helpless or hurt again. It becomes this illusion of not being hurt, and the disconnection has its very own really roots of despair and depression. Contempt is often grief and pain that never found safety or repair in the first place. And so if this is ringing a bell for you for your childhood, you might want to look at this being one of the ways that you show up. Now let's talk about frustration versus contempt, because all relationships will have moments of frustration, and we don't want to mislabel things because they mean very different things. Frustration expresses anger or disappointment. It allows for respect. It allows for the moments of we're not on the same page, but we can make our way through it. It leaves room for repair. It wants change. It hopes for change, and it believes in change. An example is like with frustration is being able to say, I'm really frustrated and I'm hurt right now and I don't know what to do about it. Whereas contempt expresses disgust, superiority, arrogance. It attacks the worth of the person. It totally shuts down repair, and it communicates hopelessness. An example might be something like, you're pathetic, you're worthless. And frustration wants change, contempt is given up. And that's really the difference. If it's something you're experiencing, that can kind of tell you what category you fall in or what the person who does this to you falls in. Now, let's talk about how we can heal, because repair is always part of what this show is designed to help people with. This is the hardest horseman to repair, but it is possible. So if you're the one expressing contempt, you need to pause and name the exhaustion, the pain, the frustration, and the chronic disappointment underneath to the person that you have this with. And you need to identify the unresolved grief or resentments and be able to name that and speak that with vulnerability. You want to reconnect with the pain that happened before the armor set in. Oftentimes, this one can't be really done alone. You have to seek support because contempt rarely heals in isolation. Some things that you can say if you're someone who holds this is starting with, I've been holding a lot of resentment. I've been holding a lot of pain. I'm exhausted from holding it all in, and I don't know how to soften anymore because I feel so hopeless. I'm hurting way more than I've admitted, and my behavior is showing that. And then if you're someone who uses contempt and you don't know it until this show, let's talk about other ways that you can show up that are not so damaging. One of the ways is that you can set boundaries that are firm around disrespect. You don't want to absorb or normalize demeaning behavior because that's really toxic. You got to focus on safety first. So make sure that your nervous system is intact and that you're able to express yourself in a way that's not going to continue or perpetuate the damage. And you want to encourage repair only when respect is restored. So some helpful language might be like, I won't engage when I'm being mocked. I won't engage when you're yelling at me or shaming me. We can talk when you're able to show me the respect that I deserve. I need emotional safety to stay in this conversation. And so that might look like you lowering your voice or kind of checking your condescension in your tone that I'm picking up because it's shutting me down. As a couple, rebuild appreciation intentionally. This takes some practice because in coupleships, this is likely an underpinning that happens in small moments, kind of like being pecked to death by a chicken. Practicing gratitude daily helps. We can't be in these uncomfortable feelings and anxiety and pain if we're practicing gratitude, which does take a lot of effort. And so I tell my clients, throw in a reminder in your phone that you do this and look around wherever you are when your alarm goes off and find some things for which you feel gratitude, because it takes practice and intention, but it totally is the antidote to a lot of these feelings. You've got to address the resentment directly, and sometimes seeking professional support like a therapist early can be really beneficial, because contempt only heals where respect is rebuilt, and sometimes that needs practice and work and time and intention. Contempt doesn't come from cruelty. It comes from pain that's been ignored for way too long. But when contempt shows up, it's a serious signal, not a failure, but a deep sign of unmet needs and unresolved injuries from prolonged behaviors. Healing requires courage, accountability, and often outside support, but it is possible to soften that armor, rebuild respect, and restore connection. If this episode resonated for you, please share it. Watch the rest of the series on the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, because it really is helpful to learn these strategies that you or someone in your relationships may be practicing so that you better understand, because you want to have a trauma-informed relationship conversations. And if you want more information on this stuff, please make sure you follow my social media sites, Kelly O'Horo. And I just really appreciate the support, and I hope you found this episode helpful. Thank you so much for listening to Adaptable. And until we meet again, don't forget to lead with love. It'll never steer you wrong.